Okay, the recording is started. So this is the December 11th, 2018 Crossplane community meeting, the first meeting of the project here. So this is an exciting day for us. This is not the normal time that we'll be running this meeting. Normally we'll be running it at 9 a.m.s every other Tuesday, but we have changed it to 8 a.m. This meeting only, so we're not conflicting with the KubeCon keynotes today. All right, and there's a question in the chat from Trevor about the recordings being posted. So they will be uploaded to YouTube, and we have a specific Crossplane channel that we'll be uploading them to. And in the agenda doc here, there's a link for the recordings of past meetings that'll take you to that playlist. It's currently empty since we haven't had any of the meetings yet. But we'll start uploading those after every meeting. I do that for the Rook project community meeting too, and I'm pretty consistent on it. So they normally get uploaded the day of the meeting. Okay, cool. So let's need to move a whole bunch of windows out of the way here for me to see. I don't think you guys see them on your side. But yeah, okay, let's go ahead and get started on the agenda here. So this is the first meeting here, so I wanted to welcome everyone to the project. We're all very excited about the reception so far. And this is very much so a community-driven project. So it is incredibly important to us, to have feature ideas and feedback and decisions about project direction, all that stuff to be very much driven by the community and the demand. We want this project to go into a direction which will serve many people well. So let's talk about who's on the call here. Let's do a little bit of an introduction if we can. So my name is Jared Watts. I am one of the maintainers on the Crossplane project, and I also work at Upbound as well, the startup company which this project came out of. And let's see, Bassam's on the call as well. Bassam, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi. So I'm Bassam. I'm also a maintainer on Crossplane and also at Upbound. So hopefully we'll get more people than just Upbounders on this project soon. But yeah, excited about Crossplane.
Awesome. Ravi, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So hi everyone, my name is Ravi. Work as software engineer at Red Hat. I'm also a maintainer of Kubernetes default scheduler. I'm primarily interested in the multi-cloud space, so I'm here today for the meeting.
Awesome,
Welcome,
Ravi. Yeah, and the scheduler can definitely use some love and some intelligence added to it. So that's right up your alley, man.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. Go ahead, Ravi. Well, okay, Steve, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey there, this is Steve Judkins. I'm a program manager at Upbound.
Thanks for joining, Steve. And then we also have Trevor on today. Your audio wasn't too bad, Trevor. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Oh, yeah. Hope it's not too bad. Just sitting in Starbucks. So, yeah, I'm Trevor Sullivan. I'm based here in the Seattle area. I am going to be actually joining Selena, which is an IoT startup here in Seattle. It has a cloud IoT product, and I actually came from working at AWS for a couple of years, most recently.
Awesome, Trevor. Thanks for joining us today. And then we also got one other attendee that just joined, Jay Cope. Is that Nick by any chance?
If I can find the mute button. Where am I? Show, chat.
Hey, John and Jeff from Red Hat.
Oh yeah, John and Jeff from Red Hat have joined.
Oh, okay, we're not muted. Great.
Oh yeah. Hi, welcome guys.
Well, good thing we didn't say that other thing.
I didn't see me stuff in my face.
Awesome. Are you what sort of projects are you guys working on at Red Hat right now?
We're currently working on object storage in Rook.
Oh, okay.
We ran into Bassam last night. He recommended we jump on a meeting with you guys. There's probably some cross-pollination we could do.
Excellent. Yeah, we're Bazam and I are also very active on the Rook project as well, so we are quite familiar with that.
Cool.
Alrighty, thanks for joining, guys. Okay, so that's introductions for everybody, and we're happy to have you all here. So let's keep going through the agenda here. So KubeCon is going on right now, and that's probably every single one of us is here in Seattle for that. Some of us had to travel from out of town, but we're all here in Seattle and ready to kick off KubeCon today with the main event starting today. One thing that I wanted to call special attention to is that at 11:40 this morning, there is going to be a talk from Ilya, who is the third maintainer on the Crossplane project. And so he's going to be giving a very interesting talk. You can just tell that from the title itself of Clusters is Cattle, wrangling clusters, not just nodes. So that'll be at 11:40, and it'll have a nice full live demo of Crossplane in action. It's in the ballroom there, and I believe there are over 800 people registered for that talk now. So if you're interested in going to that, I would probably recommend trying to get there earlier than later, because 800 folks is a lot of people. I don't know how big that room is, but it sounds like with a number that large that seating may be somewhat limited. But yeah, so Ilya won't be able to join us in the meeting today, but he is very much a core contributor to the Crossplane project, and we're looking forward to his talk today. Okay, so let's talk about kind of a bit of the roadmap of the Crossplane project. So what I like to do in these sort of community meetings, and I think I might have mentioned this before a couple people joined later on, but once again, this is very much a community-driven project. So we have a roadmap sort of defined right now. And it's really important though to make sure that roadmap reflects where we want to take the project as a whole, with and execute on the vision of the project and what the community wants to see. So just real quickly, on Tuesday, so a week ago today, exactly a week ago at 8 a.m. last Tuesday, we first went live with the project, made it public, and showed off our recent hard work to the world. And so that was the V0.1 milestone, which was, you could really think of it as a proof of concept. This kind of laid the foundation of some of the core ideas in the project, and kind of got that groundwork laid with some of the introductory features of being able to enable workload portability across multiple cloud providers of Amazon and Google and Microsoft Azure, and schedule workloads and their resource dependencies such as a database, and make sure that it says my internet connection is unstable, so hopefully I'm not cutting in or out.
You sound good, Jared.
Okay, awesome. Yes, and then laid out the project structure, the CI pipeline, the release pipelines, all the user documentation. So that was getting that project as a proof of concept out to the world. So we're already started on the next milestone, which is the V0.2 milestone. And the focus of this milestone here is going to be about, taking Crossplane to the next level to be able to start running real world applications. So we're really excited that we are going to start working on the effort and the support that it would take to run GitLab as an application on Crossplane. GitLab has a number of dependencies like Postgres and I believe Redis as well, that we're going to be adding support in, and more robust or reliable orchestration for more complicated applications and workloads like that. So that's going to kind of drive a bit of the vision for the second milestone here, and we're really excited about getting to partner up with GitLab and drive this project towards running real workloads. Bassam, do you have anything else you want to say about this?
Only that I think we should start involving the two people that I think are going to be involved from GitLab helping out with this. I don't know if they know about this community meeting yet, but maybe we should just loop them in for the next one.
Cool. That sounds good. Are they here in Seattle and KubeCon this week too?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah. So, does anybody have any comments about the what we have on the roadmap right now, or where we see the projects going in the near term?
I noticed that WordPress was mentioned somewhere in the docs that I was looking at just this morning before the call. Is that kind of a core use case here that we want to target as well?
Yeah, so in this V0.1 milestone, that was the example application that we had, stateful application that we implemented is working, and it was a good basis to start with because its dependencies are somewhat limited. It really just needs a MySQL database, which all the major cloud providers have their own managed service MySQL instance. So it was a good stateful application to get started on as a nice bite-sized chunk to take on. I don't know if necessarily if WordPress is going to be a core use case for Crossplane, but it was very nice to be able to show as a proof of concept stateful application running and being orchestrated and portable across cloud providers. So all the documentation kind of walks you through how to deploy WordPress with its MySQL database dependency and a Kubernetes cluster to run the WordPress pod in as well, to dynamically provision all of those on demand and in a portable way in whatever cloud provider of your choice.
Do we want to evolve that at all, or is it kind of just stable where it's at? So maybe some other scenarios like backup and restore, or WordPress multi-site, or anything like that, or you just kind of want to keep it simple?
That's a great question. I think that I don't know a whole lot about WordPress specifically, but that's kind of an interesting question because that starts getting into some more of the interesting features and real world scenarios for why you might want to be using multiple cloud providers in the first place. That multi-site facet that you were just talking about there, that starts getting really interesting if you're able to in a portable way deploy an application to across spanning regions or data centers or cloud providers or on premises. Then that's when you can start doing those interesting things about multi-site availability or backup mirroring across sites too. So I think in general those sort of more advanced features and fleshing out the real world use cases and usefulness of the Crossplane project could be achieved by going down that route to some of those features that you were just talking about. So that's actually a pretty good idea.
Okay, cool. I mean, I've worked with WordPress for a long time, just not in a very complex scenario, just on my own personal website, just a business site and a personal blog. But I just think maybe kind of fleshing out some of those scenarios might help to provide context for how to actually run production workloads using Crossplane.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Trevor. That's a great idea. If you have if you have some more specific details about some of those scenarios, feel free to open an issue on them so we can kind of track that and be able to pull that into the milestone or drive some more of the potential like the early design work too, because a lot of that stuff sounds like that would involve or require some more thinking and design work to kind of lay that foundation for what's the machinery and what are the reusable components and features inside of Crossplane that would need to be built to start enabling features like that. So capturing that in the issues list would be awesome if you think about that more.
Okay, cool. I had one other thing I wanted to mention as well, which is slightly on a different topic, is just around documentation. So comparing and contrasting to something like Terraform. So somebody who's new to Crossplane might come in and look at it and be like, oh, are you guys building the same thing as Terraform? And why should I use Crossplane instead of Terraform? So maybe just some compare and contrast between those tools and potentially other tools in the ecosystem. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. I think that's really important, especially for new projects, to kind of be able to quickly. I think it serves two purposes for me. One is that to kind of be able to kind of share some of the concepts with the community that may be familiar to them, to kind of get them on board to what some of the ideas are a little bit easier. And then also differentiation of why this project is different or why you might even care about it when you already have some of these other tools that may look similar at first. So the high level architecture document that we had authored is does address that at the end of this amazing massive write-up here about the whole vision and some of the architecture and stuff. There's a section at the end for related projects. There it is. So it kind of starts talking about how it's similar or different to some of the other projects. So this is buried as an appendix in the massive design and architecture vision document. But I don't think that it would be a bad idea at all to perhaps add that to into our frequently asked questions section of the main documentation, so it's more accessible. Because I'm not sure, an average user that comes to the site, I'm not sure how many of them are digging into the architecture document and reading that whole thing. So somewhere in the more accessible documentation we have here might be a very good section to start adding that content to. Because some of these questions are very important, such as what's up with the popsicle, but answering those other questions about how does it compare to Terraform or the AWS service operator and things like that. That would be good addition, I think, Trevor. If you want to capture that in a GitHub issue too, that'd be more than welcome. Okay, Bassam, is there anything else you want to talk about for vision or roadmap of the project?
Well, one of the things I think that is interesting and why the folks from Red Hat are on the call too is that there was a discussion around bucket and bucket provisioning and how it relates to Rook and RGW bucket provisioning there. So one of the things we're trying to do for the 0.2 release is to use Rook as a provisioner or have it sit behind the bucket interface that we're adding in Crossplane. So I don't know if we want to dig into it today, but it's probably worth having a discussion around how that all ties together and how people could actually, implement different or provide different implementations of buckets around this interface. I think this discussion we should probably have this discussion here, but some of it might spill over to the Rook community as well for the specific pieces. I know there's a pull request that Luke started for adding buckets to Crossplane. So we'll likely get that into Crossplane first and then figure out how to get Rook to implement that interface.
Yeah, that's a great point, Bassam. I think the focus so far has been about how in tree inside of the Crossplane project, how do you manage cloud provider resources? But there's absolutely an amazing opportunity there to manage to do a better job or a more complete job of managing on-premises local resources as well, which Rook does a fantastic job of. So kind of defining out further what that interface looks like and how other projects and other provisioners can integrate in with Crossplane in order to on-demand provision or manage these abstractions of resources that we've defined in Crossplane, such as buckets or databases and message queues, et cetera, all of that. I heard talk that there may be a bit of a live demonstration of that later this week at KubeCon. We'll see how that rest of this week goes. Okay, so let's go ahead and I think we kind of talked about the milestone. The V0.2 milestone right now is essentially the roadmap that we just talked about. So, as we're going along on delivering on the 0.2, real world application theme, we'll keep tracking issues here. Oops. yeah, we'll keep track of all the issues here in the 0.2 milestone and the 0.2 project board. All right, so looking at some of the community topics here, let's see, I've got way too many windows that are in my way. Cool, so it looks like Trevor added this one here about being experienced with Golang and starting with documentation. And Trevor, what I would definitely say to that is that that there's a lot of opportunity to ramp up on this project, because it's very, very new, and a lot of those concepts are being established, and we're fleshing out a lot of things from the ground floor still. So there's plenty of opportunity to get ramped up and get involved in the project, in whatever capacity that you feel comfortable with. And we as a community too are very supportive and encouraging of new contributors coming to the community. So learning a little bit more about Go as a language, and working on smaller pull requests and kind of expanding your experience there is something that we're happy to support and help you grow in that as well. So it's very community driven and very very collaborative community around here. All right, Luke is not on the call, I think, and there are a couple of pull requests that Luke had recently that I thought we could discuss if he was online there, but that's okay. We can follow up with that later. Two of the cool pull requests, let's go ahead and open them just for, that came from Luke, are about implementing bucket support. Abstracting what a bucket is and being able to have a portable definition that allows you to provision buckets across cloud providers. That's one of his pull requests. And then he also adds custom columns to the output for the custom resources that model the various cloud provider resources and infrastructure and abstractions on those. So when you do a kubectl get, instead of just getting the name and the age, which is the default for custom resources, you'd get all these more advanced rich columns, like what the status is, if it's if it's bound to another resource, if it has any conditions or failures and such. So that'll be a great improvement to the user experience that Luke is working on. Okay, so I think that's all the agenda items that we had for this very first meeting of the Crossplane community. So I will open the floor. If anybody else wants to bring up a topic that's not in the agenda document, then we can definitely talk about that right now if you want to. Otherwise, we can get going to the KubeCon keynotes.
Hey, I have one thing, since you mentioned that pull request about the object formatting. I wanted to just bring up, so I've been working with PowerShell. I don't know if you guys are all familiar with PowerShell, but it's kind of Microsoft programming language that replaced VB script for any kind of Windows automation. And it was open sourced and cross-platformed back in August 2016. And one of the cool things about the PowerShell plumbing is that it actually takes care of a lot of the formatting and the output of different objects that are emitted to the command line. So, I mean, it certainly doesn't have to be like a goal of ours, but I just wanted to mention it as a potential tool that we might want to integrate with, because it takes care of a lot of the console formatting and object filtering and sorting and a lot of core functionality that people might need.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring up PowerShell too. Is Bassam and I, in another life, we used to work at Microsoft, and we were on the same team that had implemented PowerShell way back in like 2004 or 5, a very, very, very long time ago. And so that's interesting. I had thought so far about PowerShell as maybe a management tool for some of the Azure integration, because they've got very good support for the Microsoft Azure cloud resources. So I had thought about it from a management tool perspective of maybe making calls through PowerShell to manage Azure resources and manage the lifecycle there. But I hadn't thought about it from a formatting or rich experience perspective. So that's something that I would need to process a little bit more. And I wonder how well that would work in at a really portable ecosystem that's targeting a lot of different environments, and what that integration story would look like, if it would be something that's manageable when you're bringing in a lot of different targets and providers and other ecosystems. So I have to think more about that, Trevor, but that's interesting to bring up.
Yeah, so I would, if I was going to be implementing some of the resource management interfaces for Azure, I would actually probably use the REST APIs directly from Golang. But I was actually thinking more of, because PowerShell is more of kind of a front end interface for console interaction, right? So for any kind of administrative action. So think about, instead of using kubectl to do like kubectl commands, you could actually use a PowerShell interface that emits objects, and you can pass objects into other commands and things like that. So rather than working with kind of the text-based, bash console, you'd actually be working with objects inside of a PowerShell module to do cross-plane management operations. Again, it doesn't have to be something we focused on, but just wanted to call it out.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for suggesting that, because that's not something I had thought of myself. One of the important tenets so far of the Crossplane project is this convergence upon the Kubernetes API, where it's the declarative management style of the objects in Crossplane, just like all the built-in objects of Kubernetes, where you kind of declare what you want the objects to state you want to get them to, but not necessarily how that happens. And so that integration is very tightly coupled and supported in the Kubernetes ecosystem, and with tools like kube control. And I would really have to think about how PowerShell would be able to fit in that effectively, because that's a new idea for me that would require some processing on my end. Cool. I like all your ideas, Trevor. I definitely appreciate your enthusiasm and motivation that you're bringing to the project. That's super, super helpful. Cool. And I see what you're saying in the chat as well. So yeah, that's, some more details about that is definitely interesting.
Hey, this is Ravi. I have some questions related to the architecture in general. Is this right time and appropriate forum to ask? Or
Yeah, absolutely, Ravi.
Okay. So the first question that I have is Crossplane, at least in the initial releases, is it responsible for creating managed services in multiple clouds? Meaning, either say if I'm a developer, I would like to create a particular managed service like MySQL in the cloud provider of my choice, or rather, is it going to be like I'll have a MySQL database where I want a couple of nodes to be created in Azure and one node or two other nodes be created in AWS or some other cloud provider? Because that actually stops the managed service concept, right? I mean, that the service guarantees that individual cloud providers give, that it would make that void, right?
Yeah, so I believe then that, if I understand your question correctly, that it's the goal there is to use those managed services from the cloud providers. They come with an SLA. They are reliable. They're feature rich. So Crossplane in a portable and extensible way, modeling those cloud provider managed services, I think is the goal here. To be able to consume those managed services in an abstracted, portable way, and getting all the benefits of those managed services is what we've been going after so far, and that still sounds like a really good direction to be going.
Okay, so the scaling and all those things are the responsibility of individual cloud provider. It's not that the Crossplane is going to be responsible for scaling up some of the components, like
well, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, that gets to when you're trying to manage resources that span across clouds, if you want to have some sort of connectivity or backup restore or replication or something like that that's spanning across clouds, having this Crossplane, which is a single control plane that's spanning all of those things, then that's when you can get the interesting automation and smart logic in the controllers that could be managing that for you. But on an individual service basis of, what the details are of inside the managed service of, AWS's RDS that implements MySQL for you, be hands off from that. Let that managed service do what it does good on that individual scope. But when it spans a broader scope of the services needing to talk to each other across cloud providers and across regions, and that's where the management smarts of Crossplane will really start coming into play at that level, I think.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
I had a question, actually. So kind of building on that, where would Crossplane store state exactly? Would it be storing it in the Kubernetes cluster where Crossplane is running then?
Yeah, so where Crossplane uses the Kubernetes API, which is backed by etcd, and so the Crossplane state goes into that same etcd database that the API server it's using also stores its state. Yes.
And
go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, you were talking about things like replicating state and things like that. So is there kind of a backup mechanism to ensure the high availability of that state in etcd? I'm not personally familiar with it.
Yeah, that's a good question. There's been nothing that's been done or talked about really in Crossplane itself, but that kind of gets to, in general, when you are running a Kubernetes cluster or a control plane that's, running on top of or using the resources of that Kubernetes cluster, having some more of those advanced management practices in place, like using the etcd operator to back up the etcd state and replicate that somewhere. That's something that's important to do, but there hasn't been much thinking about, what are the procedures or protocols or recommendation for, running a Crossplane control plane in a production environment, and what are the steps and good best practices that you need to have to make sure that you've got high availability, that you have durability, and all those things that are important for production workloads.
Beyond what's documented for Kubernetes, I'd say there's quite a bit of that that's documented and a lot of tooling around it, and so we're leveraging a lot of that.
Yep, very true.
So does Rook come into play there at all, potentially?
Did you ask if Rook does, Trevor? Is that what you asked? I don't necessarily see it in the specific topic we were just talking about of, best practices for running the Kubernetes cluster and the API server in the backing etcd state. I don't necessarily see, where Rook fits into there at that point yet, beyond, besides what the upstream Kubernetes best practices are for running a production cluster that, that are already in place there. And then another thing too is that, it could Crossplane as its control plane can run anywhere that Kubernetes is running. So you could already be using like a managed Kubernetes service as your foundation for the control plane for Crossplane, which may already have an SLA and behind the scenes management and backup of an upgrade, and all that sort of stuff for your cluster, so that it's already hands off. You don't have to worry about it yourself. So you don't have to roll your own Kubernetes cluster to be able to be running Crossplane. You could just reuse a managed service that already has a team taking care of that for you.
I have a question related to the architecture and whatever I have asked previously. Say, as a developer, if I want to create a MySQL database, can I ask it to be created in two different clouds at this point of time using cross-cloud or Crossplane?
At this point in time, not for a single, think of it as a single spanned instance. No, you can create, two different MySQL databases that are independent or in any cloud you want, but there's not yet a concept of being able to say, hey, for this database resource, I want it specifically to span multiple providers. We don't have that concept implemented or supported right now.
Okay.
All right, cool. So I think that's starting to wrap most of
Hey,
the.
Jared.
Oh yeah.
Jeff and John from Red Hat here. We just had to move our location. We turned out we were right in the waiting room for the keynote. So it's noisy. But anyway, John and I are interested. So we do have a design proposal that we're working on at Red Hat for bucket provisioning. And
In the Rook project.
in Rookceph. And we're kind of thinking architecturally, and you have your Crossplane PR, which we were looking at. But architecturally, I would like to get your guys' thought on where in the stack you think bucket provisioning makes sense. Because when I'm looking at it, my opinion at this point is that it would make more sense, either at the Kubernetes level where there's dynamic provisioning already, or higher up, say at Rookceph, to abstract it a little bit across different object providers. And now, in my view, Crossplane's even a layer higher than that, where you're concerned with workloads and SLAs. So I just wondered what the community thought is on the architectural place for bucket provisioning.
Yeah, and so I'm not sure. I don't think my connection was cutting out a little bit, so I missed some of that. But I'm pretty sure I got the overall concept from what you were saying there. And so I don't know if you've gotten a good chance to look at yet of how database provisioning is done in Crossplane right now. But that kind of, I think, is going to serve as a really good model for, in general, how resources can be dynamically provisioned in an abstracted way, where the application, all it really needs is a bucket, let's say. And so that's going to be the experience from the application developer. But then behind the scenes, you have the administrator who defines certain classes, like bucket classes of, this particular class will be provisioned by, Rook or Ceph, or this particular class here will be provisioned by Amazon, S3. And so it's a very similar concept to what you see with upstream Kubernetes dynamic provisioning of volumes, where you have a storage class and you have a persistent volume claim. Those concepts are very similar here. And we've done that, implemented that for databases. And I see a lot of crossover there of extending those concepts to how buckets would work as well. So I see, Rook and Ceph as being a provisioner of the bucket type, and the abstract request, a resource claim from an application developer just says, I want a bucket. And then, an administrator has defined a resource class that says, okay, bucket requests will be fulfilled by the Rook Ceph provisioner. So I see it as a provisioner is where, other platforms can plug in at a provisioning level.
Yeah, that's actually almost point for point the design we were considering. With a few tweaks, we had the idea of a bucket claim that would be a CRD that would be kind of an abstraction of any bucket provider. It would reference not a bucket class, but we're using storage classes just to reuse the existing the formats. And then as the provisioners for those storage classes, we were referencing, in this case, the Rook Ceph operator. And so
that sounds like some very, very similar ideas there.
Yeah, we'll have to send you guys. We have a design doc that we're still kind of touching up a bit. I am curious, how are you guys representing? How are y'all getting the data for the buckets into pods? Because that's the one kind of pain point for us, where we're still kind of figuring out, like, should we use a config map, multiple config maps, package it in a secret? What are y'all doing?
Yeah, right now the pattern that we've established is for getting connectivity back to the application to its resource that it's requested is in secrets. So the endpoint, the credentials, those will get stored into a secret, and then the pod can reference that secret for to extract out the credentials that it needs. That secret gets placed, applied to the namespace that application, the original requesting application, is running in. And right now it's kind of a convention format where the format of the secret is has well-known named fields of where to pull out or extract the endpoints or user credentials. But there's a proposal we have in the Crossplane repo that makes establishes more of a schema for different types of connectivity secrets, so that they'll be strongly typed and not just kind of a named convention, but actually a well-known first-class object inside Kubernetes with a full schema and a type and everything.
There's also a issue open on formalizing the pattern around usage of resources. So that's another thing we'll probably look at the 0.2 milestone, so that you can have a controller that watches the usage, and based on that can actually do what's needed to connect the application to its resource.
Interesting. Okay. In the in using secrets, so it sounded like you were saying. Let me repeat it back to you just to make sure I got it. So you would have like your access credentials, and then with those in the same secret, you would also have the endpoints, the URL, whatever, for the bucket. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the pattern that we've done with the database so far. Is that the endpoint for the database is in the same secret that has the user key, the user and password information, and I would assume that sort of pattern would extend to buckets as well.
Can you have a convention for a single pod wanting to access multiple buckets or provision multiple buckets, or is it a one-to-one mapping?
I think you need to speak up, Jeff. It's like super. Sorry.
It's a many to many. There's no, yeah.
One other question I had. This is something we haven't really figured out yet, and that's how to handle bucket policies. So if I have multiple keys in one namespace, and in some contrived example, I have like a web sort of a front end pod that I only want to have read only access to a bucket that's in my namespace. How do you represent the binding of a bucket policy? That is, how do you the access credentials being like read only into this bucket? So you have like an owner for the bucket, and then kind of a secondary user bound with a read only ACLs.
I saw an IMA policy on their PR.
And Basab, do you know how Luke has been addressing that with his bucket abstraction and pull request yet?
So that's also something that we're doing at the usage level. So one of the things that we're looking at is both a binding policy that tells, just like say in persistent bombs, where you can say this thing can be bound as read only or read write, or all those things. And then on the consumption side, that the user can also specify the kind of access mode they want to the resource. So it's still fairly early, but those are some of the concepts that that we're kind of building around this.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'd love to touch base with you guys in the future on this. We haven't really started writing any code yet. We've only just defined CRDs.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, let's collaborate on this. I think let's figure out where it falls and which project, which repo, all that stuff, and then let's maybe get a shared design document in place, and then figure out how to go make it happen. I think it's a cool scenario, by the way, if we can show a bucket working against Rook, all the object stores within Rook, and also working against cloud providers' object storage, all being consumed from a workload. That would be a killer demo.
Oh yeah, I mean that our end goal for this is to have a common CRD to represent buckets. And then whoever wants to define their operator provisioner underneath can just CRD.
So like S3, Mini-O, whatever, it doesn't matter underneath.
That's right. I think there's a dynamic provisioning ticket open in the Rook repo that captures some of the same thoughts as well. So
cool. We'll look for that.
We're all on the same page.
Yeah, interesting.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, it's fortunate that we're all kind of on the same level with this.
Yeah. Awesome. Nice to have you guys on this call, and excited about Crossplane too.
Yeah. Thank you guys for reaching out.
Alrighty, cool. So that sounds like a good place to go ahead and wrap up the first meeting here. This is a very productive inaugural community meeting. So thanks to everybody who was able to join today. And we'll do this again in 2 weeks. No, actually, I think 2 weeks from now is Christmas Day, so we're probably going to cancel that one. I don't think there'll be too many people around, but we will definitely get it going again in the new year. And we'll see everybody at KubeCon, in the hallways and stuff. Talk to us, and let's keep working together.
Sounds good.
Hey, is there a mailing list or anything we can get on so that we keep up with you guys?
Like a
Keep up with updates and
Google
things.
group or anything?
Yeah, there's all that stuff is linked from the main Crossplane GitHub page. So if you just go to the GitHub and there's a community a contact section, I think. Right here,
Yeah.
all mailing list and everything is right there on that.
Yeah, Slack is also good. Get on Slack, and then we'll be able to chat.
All right, sounds good.
Great.
All right, thanks everybody. Have a great
Yeah.
KubeCon.
Thank you.
Great.